Party Foul presents War Machine and Hordes Boot Camp Video 2, Reading the Cards. Hi guys, Greg here for Party Foul, and I'm going to talk to you about the cards for Warbeasts and Warjacks. If you haven't seen our video on Warcasters and Warlocks, I'd highly recommend that you check that out. It's the Reading the Cards Boot Camp Video 1. So, Warbeasts. We'll start with the Warbeasts, and you can see that the card is not completely dissimilar from the Warlock card. We'll start with, in the top right-hand corner, is the version code for the card. So, if you check and see if you have multiple versions of the card, version 1, so you can see in the top right corner there it says 2016 version 1. So that tells you that it's the first version of the card and it was published in 2016. So if you have multiple cards and one is like version 2 or as a later date, then that is the more up-to-date card. And then to the left of that, you'll see the name of the Warbeast and the type of Warbeast and its faction. So in this case, it's Pure Blood Warpwolf, Circle Heavy Warbeast, so you know that it's a Circle Faction Warbeast, and it's a Heavy Warbeast. Below that, you have their stat block, and then we'll go through the numbers specifically. The first is speed, and that's the distance that the model can move in inches on the tabletop. Beside that is the strength. That's useful for throws and for the damage. The block beside that, Mat and Rat, is the melee attack rating and the ranged attack rating for this Warbeast. These are the offensive stats for that model. So its Mat is 6 and its Rat is 5, and you use that with your 2d6 or 3d6 roll, if it's boosted, to determine whether or not your attack has been successful. And you compare that to the target's defense, which is in the next stat block, and this is the model's defensive stat block. It's defense and armor. Def is defense and arm is armor. So in this case, it has defense 14 and armor 17. So defense is what you roll against to see if you've hit the target, and the armor 17 is what you use against the damage roll to determine how successful your attack was. Models also have a command range. Warbeasts and Warbeasts have a command range, and that is sometimes usable for some of their abilities. And when you measure that command range, it is measured in inches from the model's base. So in this case, the Pure Blood Warpwolf would have a command range of 6, and then any related abilities, models benefiting from that ability would have to be 6 inches or less from the Pure Blood Warpwolf. Below the stat block, you'll see there's a space that sometimes has icons in it. That's for the special abilities that the Warbeast has. In this case, the Pure Blood has Assault. That's what that symbol means. We'll probably do a video on those symbols and familiarizing you with them. To the left bottom of the image of the model is the Fury stat for that model, and this differs from Warlocks in the sense that this model does not start the game with this Fury. This is the amount of times that the model can be forced. So in this case, the Pure Blood has Fury 4. So it can use that Fury to charge, make power attacks, buy additional attacks, boost attacks, or boost damage rolls, or be forced to use its Animus. So 4 is a generally standard sort of number for a Heavy Warbeast, and it goes from 3 to about 5. Beside that, you'll see in a smaller circle, it is the model's threshold. So you use the threshold number for determining whether or not a Warbeast frenzies if it has Fury still on it after you've leached your Fury. So in that case, if this model had 4 Fury at the beginning of your turn and your Warlock could only leach 2 of those Fury, it would have 2 Fury remaining, and you would have to make a threshold test, rolling 2d6, adding the number of Fury that are on the model, and if the die roll, exceeds the model's threshold, in this case, if you rolled 9 or greater, because you'd add the 2 for the Fury, the model would frenzy and would follow the rules for the frenzying instead of its normal activation. Below that, you have the Warbeast life spiral, and this is where damage is recorded for the Warbeast, and it has 3 sections to it. The blue section, spirals 1 and 2, are the Warbeast's mind, and when all those boxes have been filled, the Warbeast's mind, that aspect, is considered to be crippled, and when it's crippled, the Warbeast rolls 1 less die on its attack rolls. Spiral 3 and 4 at the top in red are the Warbeast's body. Likewise, when all those are filled, that aspect is crippled, and the Warbeast rolls 1 less die for damage rolls. And then finally at the bottom, in the sort of green-yellowish strip, spirals 5 and 6, that is the Warbeast's spirit. And when that is crippled, the Warbeast can no longer be forced. So, to the bottom, below the stat block are the Warbeast's weapons listed. In this case, this Warbeast has multiple weapons. The first one is Death Howler, and that is a range attack because it has that green little gun icon. The first column in there is range. RNG is range. That is the maximum effective range of the weapon. In this case, it says SP10, and that means it is a spray attack 10 inches. And you follow the rules for sprays for that. ROF is rate of fire. That means that the weapon can be fired once during the model's activation. AOE is area of effect, and that is if the weapon has a related blast effect to it. And finally, the POW of the weapon, which determines how strong and how powerful the weapon hits. And then, of course, like any other weapon system or weapon available to a model, any special related abilities are listed as icons below it. In this case, this Death Howler attack is magical. The attack below it is its other weapon attacks, and that is its claws. And it is a melee attack. That's that orange-red sword icon. And you can see beside it, it says ×2. Sometimes they list them in this manner where they say ×2 or ×3, and other times they will list them separately as individual attacks. So keep an eye out for whether or not it has a ×2 or ×3 beside the sword icon. Next is the model's melee range. RNG tells you the distance that the target has to be from the model's base to be able to target it with this attack. In this case, it is 1. At the bottom, in the little gray icon there in the bottom right, it says PC, and that's point cost. And this will cost you 17 points to purchase a Pureblood Warpwolf for your army. Beside that, the little brown box that says FA is force allocation. In this case, it says U, and that means that you can buy as many, it's unlimited, you can buy as many Pureblood Warpwolves as you like. Now that's the front of the card. Let's take a look at the back. Okay, the back of the card is not entirely dissimilar from the back of the first card of the Warlock card. You'll see at the top it says the name of the Warbeast, Pureblood Warpwolf, and under that this is something new. This is the Warbeast Animus, and all Warbeasts have one Animus, and this is basically a spell that the Warbeast can cast, and is also available to the Warlock. The controlling Warlock may cast this Animus as a spell that were on its spell card, as long as the Warbeast is within the controlling Warlock's control area. So you can see the top bar at the top is like it's addressing the columns. So you have Animus, the name of the Animus, the cost, the range, AoE, that's if there's a related area of effect for it, like a blast or something. POW, if it is an offensive Animus, it'll have a POW related to it. Duration is DUR, that's duration, tells you that it lasts for 1 turn. And offensive is whether or not it's an offensive spell and whether or not it requires an attack roll. So this Animus is Wraithbane. It costs 2, meaning the Warbeast needs to be forced for 2 Fury to use its Animus, or the controlling Warlock needs to spend 2 Fury to use the Animus. And the range of this Animus is 6 inches, meaning that the target of the Animus must be within 6 inches of the casting model, and the casting model may also place this Animus upon itself. It does not have a related AoE. It is not offensive, so it doesn't have POW, and it lasts for 1 turn. And below that, it will tell you what the effect of the Animus is. And so in this case, it gives a friendly faction model, blessed and magical. Now below that, just like the other cards that I've explained to you, there'll be a title in caps and bold with an underline, and this tells you what the following information is related to. So all of that information is related to the Warpwolf, so he gets to do all that stuff. If he had something specifically related to his weapons, there would be a title that would list the weapon. Like say if Death Howler had some sort of effect, it would be capital Death Howler, and then the abilities related under that. So that's the Warbeast card. I'm now going to quickly cover Warjack cards, and they're not entirely dissimilar, but there is some subtle differences. So I'll quickly go through those. Once again, there is a version number at the top just to make sure that you're using the most up-to-date version of the card. And beside that is the model's name and its faction and what type of model it is. In this case, it's a Cyclone Signar Heavy Warjack. Below that is the model's stat block, including its speed, strength, mat, rat, defense, and armor. So those are all the stats you use for how the model interacts on the tabletop. And you'll also note that Warjacks do not have a command rating, because I guess they're not smart enough to have one or something. And then below the stat block will be any of the special icons that are related to that model and the special abilities it might have. In this case, all Warjacks will have the construct icon, and that will sort of determine how it interacts with some attacks and some abilities. And then below that, you'll notice it has a number of weapon systems. In this case, it has 2 Metal Storm cannons, And I want to draw your attention to the little gray box below the ranged icon. And the top one says right, and the bottom one says left. And that's very important and very dissimilar from Warbeasts in that its weapon systems are tied to a system, which I'll show you when we get to the damage grid. And then another sort of strange thing about it is you see it has range 12 for the Metal Storm cannons. But something else that is kind of unique from other cards that we've looked at is its rate of fire, or ROF, is random, and when it says D3. And that means you roll a D6 and divide the number by 2. So if you roll 1 or 2, you get 1 shot, 2 to 3, you get 2 shots, 3 to 4, you get 3 shots. So it's kind of random, but interesting. Below the 2 ranged weapons, you'll notice that he has 2 open fists, and this is a different sort of listing than we looked at the Pure Blood, where it had 2 claws listed as the same weapon system. It just had a little ×2 beside the melee icon, and you just have to kind of keep an eye out for that. They do it that way. I'm not sure exactly. I think they do it this way on this card because, as you can see, once again, they have those little gray boxes below the melee icon that tell you that each of those open fists have a related system that they are tied to. The range, you have a melee range for these open fists, and they have the open fist icon. Now, here's the sort of like the big difference between one of the big differences between Warbeasts and Warjacks is their damage grid. And the damage grid is not a spiral like Warbeasts. It is a column. Column is organized as columns and rows. The columns are the important parts. So when you're marking damage, you roll a column just like you roll a spiral number for the Warbeasts, and you mark the damage starting from the top and going down, and then proceeding to the right as if you're reading. And you notice that there's a bunch of letters in there, and those are all the systems that the Warjack has. And when those particular boxes are filled, so say, I'll quickly go through them. L are the left weapon systems. R are the right weapon systems. M is the movement system. And C is the cortex system. So if all the L boxes are filled on the Warjack's damage grid, any weapon systems tied to the left, that would be the left Metal Storm and the left Open Fist, those would be crippled, and they would suffer 1 less attack die and 1 less damage die when making attacks with that one. Similar to the right side, if the right side is damaged, 1 less die to attack damage. The movement system is out. That's if all of the M's are filled in by damage. The model can no longer run, can no longer charge, can no longer trample or slam. So you have to watch out for that. Once that movement is crippled, can't do a lot of stuff. The C's are crippled, and that's cortex. The model no longer receives focus or gains focus. It no longer can. So it won't get power up, it can't be allocated focus, and you can't use solo or something to walk up and give it some focus. So that will extremely limit its abilities to do things as well. Just like Warbeasts, there are different ways to remove damage from a Warjack's damage grid. Now to the lower right, you see the PC, and that's just like the other Warbeast card. It's point cost. In this case, the Cyclone is 13 points. And the little black box besides that says FA, and that's force allocation, tells you how many of this type of model can be in your army, and this says U, and that means unlimited. You can have as many Cyclones as you want. That's the front of the card. Let's look at the back of the card. The back of the card for Warjacks is generally a lot simpler because it does not have that animus, the spell ability that the Warbeasts get. The top tells you that it's a Cyclone card, and then it tells you that just like the other ones, capital, bold, underline, any of the following information is special rules that relate to that particular item. So Metal Storm and Metal Storms have covering fire, which are a star action, and then it tells you what to do with it. So that's Warjacks. The big differences are the life spiral versus the damage grid, and the tying of weapon systems to those crippled aspects, those systems that can be crippled or not. And hopefully, after looking at that, it becomes very clear how to read that information on the cards. We'll do another video on how to properly mark damage, and look out for our other video on units and solos.